Welcome back to another episode. We are continuing our celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month, and we are speaking with Cassandra Robinson. Cassandra is a copywriter and brand strategist, a LinkedIn growth expert that helps you shine through storytelling, and the host of Grinding in Grace podcast, which I love. Most importantly, she is a lover of Jesus. Cassandra, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Enrique. It's an honor to be here with you to encourage your audience today.
Before we get into our topic today, which, oh, by the way, is leadership and faith living, Cassandra, please tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, you know what? Like you said, you gave me a great intro, Enrique. My name is Cassandra Robinson. I am a copywriter and brand strategist. I help specifically people of faith build their personal brands through storytelling, helping them unlock their voices and share their testimony, the goodness that God has bestowed on them in their life. I help to draw that out through the gifts that God has given me. So that's a little bit about me. And I am just excited to be here with you all.
Wonderful. Now, the subject matter of faith is something that most people shy away from in the realms of professional life, right? You hardly ever hear anyone take time to talk about their faith walk, their beliefs, how they view things from a biblical perspective or from a faith-based perspective, because normally it's shied upon as something, one of those three that you don't talk about, right? Government, faith, and I don't know what else, but I know those two are there. Those two are front and foremost one of the topics that you just don't dabble in. But before we get into how we actually can implement that into our lives, what is faith to you?
And yeah, politics and faith, that's kind of the thing, like you mentioned, you shy away from. But faith to me, honestly, is a relationship, Enrique. Faith to me is a relationship with your creator, an intimate and personal relationship with the one who created you, with the one who died for you and loves you eternally. That's truly what faith is to me, and living by faith. I know we'll get into that, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And folks, faith is going to take different forms and different, things, and it's going to mean different things to
Mm-hmm.
different people. And I'll tell you, as far from my perspective, what faith is believing enough in something that you'll walk to it even if you can't see it, right? And
Mm,
and and
good.
faith, and my faith journey took a lot of leapings into voids where I thought that there was no way that if I went that way, it was going to result in something positive. But lo and behold, when God says, "Hey, step forward," and you do, all of a sudden there's floor, right? So it's
Amen.
wonderful to see that action, right? Because the Bible says faith without works is dead. It is a thing, but it requires another thing. And so, as we're talking about faith, it's one thing to have faith, to believe in something other than yourself for an outcome. There is another thing to believe it enough to live it. And so I
Amen.
wanted to ask you, what is faith living from your standpoint?
Faith is very subjective. It's very personal. And so for me, faith living is trusting in, like you said, that there's something greater than yourself, trusting in your creator, in this loving creator who um, gave you life, who's the reason that you're in existence, and who is the reason why you're walking this earth right now, and that you have lungs in your breath, and trusting that person, that creator, that he will provide everything that you need, and trusting in him when you are taking those leaps of faith because you feel compelled to um, embark on a journey that you feel called to. You feel called to. You feel called by your creator to embark on the entrepreneurial journey, starting a business, or entering a relationship, whatever it might be, knowing that Romans 8:28, right? That all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. So it's that deep faith and trust in something bigger than yourself.
I mean, I'll tell you that as a minister, as a servant of the Lord for many
Mm-hmm.
years now, there were times where my faith did not match my walk. And I'll tell
Mm.
you that, and full disclosure, because I may not be proud of it, but it's definitely a testimony, right? It leads you to better pastures, better walk. And faith living to me is just the fact that you can read something, you can believe it and apply it to your life, but the power is not enacted until you actually walk it. And so when you talk about faith living, for those of you that are listening and you're wondering why things are not panning out as you thought, maybe you're not walking that which you believe. And
Mm.
sometimes that absence of action to faith is what results in no fruit. And so for those that may be listening and you're wondering what faith living is you putting your hand to the plow and actually swinging it. Right. There's another thing. Everybody says, I believe, I believe, I believe, but until you actually have to act on it. But believe me, it's hard sometimes. Some of the things that come our way, right? And God says, "Do this," and you're like, "Oh,
Mm.
nah, not that," right?
It's true.
So it requires that action to enact the power, to actually see the power. When we were talking, we're from Hispanic, Latino
Yes.
backgrounds, that
Mm-hmm.
in itself brings a different flavor to our lives. If we were some other community, it would bring its own flavor. But Cassandra, I see a lot of times that faith is huge in the Hispanic Latino culture. And I wanted for you to share how has your Hispanic heritage influenced your faith walk?
Enrique, I was raised Catholic, like many Hispanic or Latinos, and I, got saved into Christianity when I was 19. I think that having that background, that rich culture and tradition of the, Catholic um, religion helped to really act as a launch pad into my Christian faith and Christian walk. And I think as a Hispanic woman, I come from a long line of faith walkers, who have put their faith and trust in God when they didn't have anything, right? Like my family, Mexican migrant workers that traveled all across the West Coast to pick various vegetables and fruits to make a living, right? They didn't have much physically or materially, right? And it was really hard work, faith and trust and hope that God was going to see them through. So I think that just has been passed down too personally, as well, as far as my work ethic and my determination, but also my faith, right? When things don't look so great outwardly, the circumstances aren't necessarily ideal, remembering that God is faithful. God is faithful to see you through, even in the midst of the most trying situations. That my ancestors and my uh, family has been there and been through, and He's seen them through, right, and brought them to where they are now. And I wouldn't be the woman I am today if it wasn't for those experiences. So I think that's deeply impacted my faith walk now that I'm talking with you about it.
And it's amazing. Earlier we were just discussing some of my background. I come
Yes.
from a Catholic Santero mix, if I was to say, right. And it's funny because my mom was Catholic, my dad was Catholic, right? So he was raised from a Catholic perspective, but he got into this thing called Santeria, which is basically the idolization of any statue that they may perceive as the answer giver, right? And I remember he had this huge Indian statue, and I remember him giving me a necklace with a charm, and then right in the middle of the charm was an Indian head, right? An Indian head, and it was all part of this I would say cult, if I would,
Culture.
if I
Yeah.
it is. And he would, pray to these things. And I remember this one time my mom would tell me a story when I was between maybe 1 and 2 years old in Puerto Rico, where my dad had this shrine room, and I remember it as a little kid. And She said one day she was washing dishes, yada yada yada. She opens the fridge, she goes to put some stuff, whatever she was doing at the time, and closed the fridge door. And there before her was this Buddha standing in front of her, laughing like uncontrollably, that she lost all reasoning and jumped right outside that kitchen window. Now it was just a one floor a house, right? I would say a four wall house, and she jumped right out and took off and forgot that she left me in there. So, so
You're joking.
no, no, this is real deal. And so, there was a spiritual life that my dad had. My mom was in a spiritual walk as well, as in the Catholic Church, both trying to find answers. They were both trying to find answers to the things that plague those that have not, right? Because there's faith, and then there's faith of the have-nots, and one is stronger. And I'll tell you that right now. When you got a $2, you look at your bank account, if you have one, right? Because back then they really didn't have no bank account. But if you look at your bank account and it's the first of the month and all you have left is $2, there's a have not faith. And that
Great point.
usually is real deep rooted, because you're like, Lord, it's $2 in there. And I got a whole month, right? You mentioned migrant workers.
Yeah.
That work ethic, that determination, which is I love of the Hispanic Latino community. When it seems like there's no way this can happen, God shows a way, and He shows Himself strong. So, what made you choose the way of faith? Having all these, and I've just mentioned my father, it was just to highlight, there are so many options to grab onto when you talk about faith. He chose idolization
Sure.
of figures that were created. My mom found it through, it was, so you got to say, in the cat, there is some idolization
There
there,
it is.
but there's a strong rooted, um, understanding of God, Jesus Christ, His upbringing, Mary, Joseph. So they incorporate the whole totality of Christ. When you talk about that, but both were grabbing onto something that can give them hope, that can make them feel like it's gonna be okay. So, what made you choose the way of faith?
You hear a lot of testimonies, Enrique, that people often meet God or find God or find their faith when they hit rock bottom, right? When they have some sort of catastrophe in their life, tragedy, that really brings them to their end. And there's this saying that you hit rock bottom and find out that he's the rock at the bottom, you know? That he's ultimately that foundation, that rock that you're looking for, that's that the unshakable ground when everything else in your life may be crumbling. Could be your career, your marriage, your relationships, your health. What else in this world can we hold on to that's absolute, that's never changing, that's eternal? And that for me is God. I found God at a low point. I mean, I was a teenager when I found the Lord, but I had gone through a breakup at the time, of a high school love, and I had been with for several years, and 4 or 5 years, and I just was really depressed. And anyways, that's a friend preached the gospel to me, and I was at a low point, right? I was a low point in my teenage life and season, um where I felt like, what else is there? You know what I mean? What can fill this void that I so desperately want to fill, right? We do it with all sorts of different things, right, Enrique? With drugs, with sex, with money, with all sorts of vices that this world has to offer. You name it, right? And we try to fill that void. That Pascal Blake says there's a God-shaped vacuum in every man that's created. There's this God-shaped vacuum that only God can fill. I mean, we try to fill it with all sorts of things, but ultimately, at the end of the day, only God can fill that. And so that's what has been something. I mean, me and the Lord have gone through a journey, right, over the last 14, 15, well, of course, my entire life, but when I received him over the last, 14 years, it's been a roller coaster, like any relationship, right? There's been ups and downs, and valleys and mountains, but that's what's really caused me to choose the faith route, Enrique, because nothing else even comes close.
Now you have mentioned earlier the entrepreneurial route, and just talk about this a little, because you're an entrepreneur. You're helping folks become clear on their message, especially when you talk about faith led employment, faith led entrepreneurial journey. There are entrepreneur journeys that are differ from everyone else. But once you start adding faith and Jesus and and the proclamation of freedom of the soul, it tends to be something that people shy away from. So when you're talking about the entrepreneurial path, how can we use faith as a catalyst to that path?
Over the last 3 years of building my personal brand on LinkedIn, I discovered a simple 4-step framework to help people unlock their voice and embrace their God-given potential. And the acronym that I use is KNOW, right? Because the first step is to know who you are in Christ. As you build your personal brand and put yourself out there, your content, your story, you're gonna come up against a lot of insecurities, doubt, imposter syndrome. What are other people gonna think of me? That might prevent you from stepping into and embracing that call to create, that God has given you. So it's fundamental and essential for you to know who you are in Christ, understand your identity as a child of God, as a daughter or son of the King, right? Because then you will have that internal confidence needed to step forward versus looking for that external validation from others. So I think that really using your faith as a catalyst, recognizing who you are and the power that you've been given, the gifts that you've been given, as a child of God and embracing that and walking in that, as you show up, I think has been fundamental in my entrepreneurial journey.
Well, you know, there are folks that are in leadership positions that have chosen to abide by the ground rules of politics and religion, right? Mostly because there are policies that are written that govern the structure and the, I would say, the actions of those that fall within that organization. But I feel strongly about the comment in the Bible where it says, if you deny me before men, I will deny you before the Father in heaven. And it's actually talking about the ultimate day, right? The day of judgment. And how does a leader resolve that verse, that encouragement from Christ to be the light of the world, regardless of what's enacted on what policy may be there, what governs an organization. How do you resolve that and still be a representative of Christ uh, in the midst of that type of situation?
You know what comes to mind, Enrique, is a quote from, I think, Billy Graham or Francis of Assisi. I've heard both, but use preach the gospel, use words if necessary, right? So when you're in a corporate setting or an organization where you're not as able to share your faith so openly, pray, right? Talk about the Bible, perhaps, like, people are watching you, right? People will see the gospel through how you treat them, right? How you work, your determination, your quality of work, your attention to detail, your character, right? Without you ever mentioning a Bible verse at all. So I think that really is something that we as believers, as we go out into the world and have small businesses or we work for another organization, that we can really profess our faith by the way we love.
You know, you mentioned love, and I can't think of any other person but Jesus to have demonstrated what love truly is. He said, and if you follow how he acted, and for those leaders that are thinking, yeah, I'm in a hard place, I would like to do this, then the other. Just remember that Jesus preached in the church, in the synagogue. He acted in the world. It's two different things, and you have to understand. Just kind of like what you said, Cassandra, on sometimes it's with words. Not all the time it's with words, but it's mostly with your life. Faith living in regards to leadership is how you act, and your actions tells the world who your father is. Now,
Amen.
now, if you take that, if you take that, um, you might be identifying with somebody that you thought wasn't your father. so, and I bring that to light because
It's a
a
good
lot of
point.
people, a lot of people think that faith living is a hard thing. No, a hard thing is dying for somebody you don't even know and knowing that you're doing it for their sins. That's a hard thing. Somebody you don't even know, right? There's some people that I know that might not get that from me, right? But Jesus did that,
He did.
and he did it so that you can have that encouragement that if you act like your father, you will be of your father, and you will return to your father. And
Amen.
those three things have always resounded in me as I lead from a faith-based perspective. And I could do that all day long and not find the wrong thing about what I'm doing. And so I love that you say, sometimes it's with words. Um, if Cassandra, if there was anything you would like to tell someone in regards to their leadership walk and faith, what would that be?
One of my favorite verses is Ephesians 2:10, right? That says, God is, you are God's masterpiece, created with a purpose that He prepared in advance for you to fulfill and to walk in, that He prepared these good works in eternity past for you to fulfill. So when we look at that verse and we see that all the heavy lifting has been done, right? It's ultimately our receiving of that purpose and our confidence in what he has prepared in advance for us to do to walk in, and that really the Lord desires obedience over sacrifice. And by obeying and embracing that calling, whatever that might be, or whatever that might look like in your life, whether it's being a stay-at-home mom or owning a small business or a wife, all these human duties that we all have to do, right? That He's called us to, realizing that God has fully equipped you to successfully complete those endeavors and be a victor. So at the end of the day, when you are at the judgment seat, that you would hear the words in the Gospels, right? Good and faithful servant. You have been responsible over few things. Enter into the enter into the joy of your master, and I will put you over many.
That's wonderful. Now, folks are probably saying, hey, I have a way of living that is faithful. And I do want to get my words out. I do want to make sure that my messages are clear, and I capitalize on the business I may have or a business venture that I may be thinking about. How can they get a hold of you to talk to you about your services or anything that you can help them with?
Yes, absolutely, Enrique. I'd love to work with anyone who, whether you're a Christian or a faith-based entrepreneur, business owner, coach, consultant, and even if you're not, but you're curious about that, I'd love to work with you as well. Help you really unlock your voice and share your untold story. Stories that you feel deeply called to start sharing with the world, but you just don't know where to start, and you're insecure and you have all these things that you need to work through. I'd love to help you do that. And the best way to do that is to reach out to me, of course, on LinkedIn, where Enrique and I connected. DM me, message me, connect with me, send me a little note when you send a connection request. Say, hey, I heard you on Enrique's podcast and I'd love to learn more about your services, or I'd like to just get to know you more. And I'd be happy to connect with you and see if it'd be a good fit to work together. Also, I do have like a podcast like an Enrique as well. It's been a little while since I've created an episode, but that's Grinding in Grace. And so if you'd like to check that out too for more tips on unlocking your voice and embracing your God-given potential, that's another free resource for you as well.
All right, folks. Well, we're going to make sure to have that as part of the show notes and the video so that you can get a hold of Cassandra. Cassandra, it's been such a pleasure to speak about faith-based living as a leader, as an entrepreneur, and as a human being. Because these are times. I don't know if you've noticed, but these are for the last 3 years have been faith. um I would say you would have to reach, not to integrate faith into your life for the last 3 years. If you've made it without faith, please let me know. So I know what it is that you're doing. But I'll tell you what, I mean, we've been in a tumultuous, health stricken, financially strapped 3 years. And
Yeah.
there's been a lot and I know from my perspective, from me, faith has taken center point from day one back in February 2020 when, I got laid off from work, or better to say, my employment stopped. Right. Um, and, and the journey has been faith driven. So I hope that this episode has been enriching to you. Thank you, Cassandra, for being with us today. And folks, today's episode is sponsored by Triad Leadership Solutions. If you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to subscribe and let us know by leaving a message or a comment right now. We're always looking for new ideas and guests that we can add to our show. So if you know someone or have a topic that you would like featured on the podcast, or want to sponsor our show, we'd love to hear about it by emailing us at triadleadershipsolutions@gmail.com. Cassandra, once again, thank you so much for taking this time. I know it's a vacation for you, soon to be happy birthday. So we celebrate you
Thank
and your
you.
birthday. And folks, tune in next week when we have another great leader to help us dissect leadership from another angle. And as we love to end the show, success to you.
Thank you, Enrique.